Society plays a significant role in the development of education system. The role of socio-cultural factors, political conditions, and economic milieu determines the nature of educational institutions, its objectives, and curriculum development. Today, we will learn about the historical background of the Philippine educational system. I am Arian de Guzman. Join me as we go back to the time when Philippine education started. It all started during the pre-colonial period. During pre-Spanish period, children were given the rudiments of education in both academics and vocation. The father trained his sons in manual labors like hunting, fishing, mining, and shipbuilding, while the mother trained her daughters in cooking, gardening, serving, and other household chores. It is said that in ancient province of Panay, there was a barangay school called Bothoan under the charge of the teacher, who is usually an old man. They taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and the use of weapons to children. Next is the Spanish era. With the coming of Spain, the European system of education was introduced to the archipelago. Missionaries established primary schools, colleges, and universities. They aimed to make the native Filipinos obedient and God-fearing Christians. This is why religion was a compulsory subject at all levels. In addition to religion, the native children were taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and some vocational and practical arts subjects. There was no co-education during the Spanish times. Boys and girls studied in separate schools. During the early part of the 17th century, colleges and universities were established, which were originally open only to the Spaniards and those with Spanish blood, or the mestizos. It was only during the 19th century that these universities began accepting native Filipinos. For nearly 300 years, education in the Philippines was the primary responsibility of the Catholic Church. The missionaries established the schools, provided the teachers and facilities, and decided what should be taught. It was only in the last half of the 19th century that the government took an active part in promoting education in the colony. Hence, education during pre-colonial period was geared toward their needs. Because of colonization by several foreign countries and several historical events, our education underwent several changes. But still, some of the ancient teachings which are practical even in the present were retained. Next is the American regime. The Americans had a different approach. Their principal goal in coming to the Philippines is to educate and to train in the science of self-government. Even while U.S. troops were consolidating their foothold in Manila in 1898, schools were already opened in the city. But unlike the Spaniards who neglected to propagate their language, the Americans made it a point to teach English to the Filipinos. The American soldiers were the first teachers of the Filipinos. In January 1901, free primary education was provided and a school for Filipino teachers was established by the Philippine Commission by virtue of Act No. 74. The implementation of this act created a heavy shortage of teachers that called for the recruitment of 600 teachers from America. They were the Thomasites. The Americans gave bright young Filipino students opportunity to take up higher education in American colleges and universities. These Filipinos came to be known as pensionados, for their education in the United States was financed by the government in the Philippines. Hundreds of Filipino pensionados were able to study in the U.S. until 1928. From the rank of these pensionados come the future civic, business, and political leaders of our country. Next is the Commonwealth Era. Education continued to receive from the Commonwealth government the same attention that the Americans gave it. President Quezon created the National Council of Education in 1936 as an advisory body on educational matters. The council made important recommendations to further improve the educational system in the Philippines, which were accepted and carried out by the government. It was during the Commonwealth regime that an organized effort to develop a common national language was started in compliance with the mandate of the 1935 Constitution. To help counteract the American cultural influence among the Filipinos, President Quezon greatly encouraged the revival of native culture as well as desirable Filipino values. In 1940, several changes were made in the Philippine educational system by virtue of the Educational Act of 1940. Under this law, the elementary course was reduced from 7 years to 6 years. The minimum age of admission to grade 1 was raised to 7. The school calendar was also changed, so instead of the school year from June to March, it was changed to July to April. Japanese occupation. Schools and churches were also used as propaganda tools of the Japanese. Nihongo, the Japanese language, was made a compulsory subject in all schools. In government and private offices, classes in Nihongo were open to propagate the Japanese language and culture. They emphasized love for work and dignity of labor. Japanese Catholic priests were sent to the Philippines to help promote the idea that Japan, being an Asian country, was a friend of all Asian people, including the Filipinos. The present. In August 2001, Republic Act 9155, otherwise known as the Government of Basic Education Act, was passed, transforming the name of Department of Education, Culture and Sports to the Department of Education. It was assumed that the most fundamental objective of education is to provide the school-age population and young adults with skills, knowledge, and values to become caring, self-reliant, productive, and patriotic citizens. Educational policies have been geared to the accomplishment of better manpower production through the understanding by the students of land reform, taxation, economic production, anti-drug and anti-pollution, and conservation education. To accomplish these goals, the value and work-oriented curricula were encouraged. Education promotes the development of the knowledge, skills, understanding, values, and actions required to create a sustainable world which ensures environmental protection and conservation, promotes social equity, and encourages economic stability. That men do not learn very much from the lesson of history is the most important of all the lessons that history has to teach.